Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the National Museum of the American Indian. Have many of you been here all day? Is this the first presentation for anyone? Oh, wonderful. My name is Melissa Bazzani. I am the film programmer here, and I'm helping out in the theater during our first ever Hopi Festival. I want to thank our museum's National Council and the Henry Luce Foundation for helping us bring this delegation of 27 Hopi here to teach us a little bit about their culture. I also would like to give a land acknowledgement to the ancestral caretakers of the place that we're in, Washington, D.C., to the Piscataway people. Many of their descendants still live in D.C. and the surrounding area, and you can learn a lot about them. There are two federally recognized tribes of Piscataway. And on the second floor here in the museum, we do have a small exhibit called Return to a Native Place, right at the elevator landing, that talks a bit more about the people of the Mid-Atlantic. Right now, we're here for Hopi history. If you were here for the dances, the gentleman who has been introducing the dances and explaining a little bit about them, he is the one that is giving our Hopi history today, Bruce Talawyma.
Thank you for being here. And today, this is my last presentation, not my last time on stage. But we are so grateful that all of you are joining us. And also yesterday, we had a good crowd. And we really are very grateful for all this to be happening for the Hopi people. Because Hopi does have a long history. And when I think about it, and when I am allotted 30 minutes, that's not a whole lot of time to cover a lot of history, where we've been, what we've been through, and all that. So I'm basically going to highlight a lot of the things that I think probably are maybe more familiar to you. But we've had a long history, and part of our storybook is actually shown by this gentleman on the screen. His last name is Tawatawa, and he actually is down below at the Potomac. He runs a tourism business, and he's the one that will take you on the tour. There's a couple, I think, individuals that do what he does, but he's one of them that will take you on a tour if you ever get a chance to come out to Hopi, and he'll show you where a lot of these pictoglyphs are, because there's many out there. And that's not the only place on Hopi. We have them in Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and down in Mexico, because Hopi had a migration. And our story is that we came from the Grand Canyon. There's a place called Supapana. It's a very, very spiritual place, and that's where Hopis emerged from. And the story goes that we as Hopis came through the bamboo, and we wanted to find a somewhat better place. So, like anything, there is always one or two that will sneak in and come with the crowd that are not always willing to do good things, but to be resistors, I guess. But in life, I think we experience that a lot. But sometimes it's a good thing, because they sometimes wake you up and say, hey, maybe you're not doing the right thing. Maybe you need to do something different. So we have that experience. So as I mentioned, the Hopi history goes way back. So the first time that they started to find things that related to Hopi was back in 400 BC. So that tells you how far or how long we've been around. And then the migrations. The migrations were such that we traveled probably, as they say, to all corners of the world. So our footprints are almost everywhere. So in this pictoglyph, you can see some of those figures in there, and also like up there looks like a footprint of a bear, and all the animals that they've encountered, all the humans that they've encountered. So this is their story in terms of where they've been and how we all ended up on Hopi. So during the migration, there were we have clans. So for example, I belong to the Tobacco clan. And there's the Snake clan, there's the Sand clan, there's the Bamboo clan. So every clan has a responsibility in Hopi. So my responsibility is to provide the tobacco, because tobacco is what we use for prayer. So in every religious ceremony that we have, we also in Hopi have an hierarchy. So for lack of a better word right now, we call them mongwi, which is a quick translation is a chief. Whoever's in charge of that ceremony, he's first, and then there's always a tobacco clan member, because he's the one that lights the pipe, and he's the one that offers the pipe to the mongwi, the chief, and then they share that prayer. So every clan has their responsibility. There's a water clan, corn clan. So you'll see a dance later, and that's all part of that too. But this is showing you where we exist now in northeastern Arizona, near the Four Corners area. So that's the landmark that's closest to Hopi. If you've never been out to Hopi, that's where we are. How many of you have ever been out to Hopi? Oh, great. So the rest of you, this is your opportunity. We call it our sacred home. It's a beautiful place to us, and those of you who have been out there probably agree, right? It is a special place for us. So the portion in the middle that says Hopi Indian Reservation, that's how much land we have left that belongs to us. The outer portion, that was the initial land that we had. So through all the different things that happened, that's what we're reduced to. And a lot of it is due to federal government involvement. So that's what we have now. So in the where the dots are, they all have Hopi names. And Hopi, long time ago, they still do. They have shrines in all those dots. So that still signifies our boundary. So what that means to Hopi is that all that land still belongs to us. And we in Hopi also have what we call prophecies that tell the futures of what's going to come next. So even though we may not occupy those areas, those lands still belong to us because those are marked by our shrines. So we continue with the pictoglyphs, and a lot of times people ask, what's that figure, that the skinnier one? And a lot of times people will look at those and they say they look like aliens. And there's a lot of stories about that. And we have Hopi stories that tell us where they've traveled. And Hopis have the stories about, we've been to the moon. We've been to the moon, we got there first. So we have all those stories. And there's even stories of sightings on Hopi. And the reason why they don't really report them, because once you report them, what happens? You have a mass of reporters or people that are really, there's people out there that are always looking out for, what do you call it, UFOs. So we don't want that, so we don't really report it. I mean, there's been sightings out there, but this does tell our migration. So the Hopis traveled, as I mentioned, to all the corners of the universe, and they finally, through their spiritual guidance, ended up on what we now call Hopi, and it's the most. There's some people call it. There's nothing out here. They're so dry. It's so desolate. Why did you choose that place? And our answer is that that's what we called home. That was our calling, and that's why we're there. And it's a very spiritual place, and we have cherished that land for a long time. So when you see one of these circles here, that's our migration story. So we traveled, and then we finally ended up in the center, and we call that the center of the universe. So Hopi, in our minds, in our beliefs, is the center of the universe. So as I mentioned, the first, I guess, the discovery of Hopi was back in 407 BC, and then in 500, 600 BC, they started to find pottery during excavations. And then before we started building homes like this, they were actually living in pit houses because the Hopis were migrating and they were basically nomadic. So they were building like pit houses. So whenever the calling came, they would start to move on. So when they finally started to settle down in what we now call Hopi, they started to build these structures between 1900 and 1070. So some of these structures are still standing, the original structures. Now, this village, it looks like Uraivi, and you can tell that we had several stories, so we weren't really trying to build high rises or anything like that. But that, it almost looks like they're like condominiums, and you'll notice that some of the doorways are low because Hopi a long time ago we were really short, and Hopi long time ago was basically a vegetarian because we didn't eat a lot of meat. So you look at me and I'm 5'10", and so sometimes they ask, are you a true Hopi? Because you're taller than most Hopis. But anyway, I get that all the time. But this is the beginning of our structures and when we started building the villages. And in between 1250 and 1350, we started to grow. And we grew to about probably somewhere around 12,000 Hopis. And then in 1276, 1299, that's when we experienced our first massive drought. It was severe enough that people started to leave the villages to look for water. But eventually, through our prayers and our belief and our faith, the rains came back, so the people actually came back. So our tradition is that, our belief is that you have to have faith in whatever your belief is. So our faith is in the spirit world. We pray to the sun. That's the one that comes out, warms the earth, makes things grow. So that's our strength there. So every morning we'll pray to the sun. And we always pray that the sun will always come out. And we don't want to think about what if it doesn't, right? And then we don't want to really think about that. But that's kind of what we believe in. And we believe in everything has life. Even the rocks. The rocks have life. Every plant, every living thing is very important to us. So those of you that have been on Hopi, this was First Mesa, Walpi, long time ago. And some of the houses, well, most of those houses, this is the plaza in Walpi. It's still there. It still remains. Dances are still held there. Those houses, they've been basically fixed up so that, they just repaired the ruins and everything. And that stone is still standing there. And behind that stone is the kiva. That's our underground chamber. That's where we have our dances during the winter time. And then, as I mentioned, that we believe in everything has life. So when we plant, you put the seeds in the ground, they start to grow, and they come through the earth. So when the weather warms up, like in March or April, then the dancers will come out into the plaza. But before then, we have what we call night dances. Those dances are held inside those kivas. So we've been doing that for years. And this is just close to the reservation. It's the area called Coal Mine that's close to where we are. And this is just another example of the houses that were built long time ago. And as we pray for rain, rain is so, moisture, water is the most precious thing that we have. And this is actually a plaza that you see. This is in Oraibi, one of the oldest remaining villages on Hopi. People still live there. Dances are still held in that plaza. So when rain comes, this plaza can, as you see the kids, it can be used as a swimming pool. So the kids are in there swimming. It's not a modern swimming pool, but it's a good recreational area for the kids. And even myself, growing up on Hopi, remembering all those good times. And this is an aerial view of Second Mesa area, those of you that have been out there. This is an old picture, remember? And then we went through, before Columbus arrived in 1492, we actually got in the first non-Hopis that came out on the Hopi were the Spaniards. The Spaniards came first, and not so good things happened. The Spaniards tried to assimilate us into their religion. They were very, very cruel, very harsh. We went through some really, really hard times. And the Hopis were even punished when they were doing their ceremonies. And some even led to death. So when they built their churches, the Hopis were against it, but because the Spaniards were well armed, remember, Hopi didn't have any weapons or anything like that except probably bows and arrows and things like that. So some of you probably remember the history that in 1521, Spain conquered Mexico. So that's where a lot of this came up north. And so when the Spaniards were in the Hopi country, they were looking for the 7 cities of gold. And they never found it, right? So Zuni was also the other Pueblo village that was really impacted back then. And then they had the first revolt back in 1680 by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Tebaldi will be doing that presentation, so I'm not really going to go into a lot of that. And during that revolt, Hopi actually drove the Spaniards out of Hopi. Remember, it wasn't a state yet, so we can't, and it wasn't part of the U.S. yet, so the Hopis were very successful. And then they came back again in 1701, between 1701 and 1742, and then the Hopi, this time, really drove them out for good. So we have brothers and sisters that are in the other pueblos in New Mexico. Some of you are probably familiar with those pueblos in New Mexico. And we're all part of that family because we're all pueblos. But Hopi is the only one that has never, how would I say this, impacted in a way that they incorporate the Catholicism into their ceremonies. Hopi is the only one. When this church was built, after they drove out the Spaniards, this church was struck by lightning, and that's not a good thing for Hopi's belief. So that was taboo. So once that lightning struck that, nobody touched it. Hopis do have a purification ceremony for lightning, but they wanted this to be untouched, not destroyed, but also a remembrance of what our ancestors experienced and what we went through, and to also to be a testimony that our culture is really important and we want to preserve it. So that's why this was standing and still standing. Okay. Real quick. So again, I only have 30 minutes, so there's a lot of history in that we have. But one of the things I wanted to also stress too is that even though the Spaniards were trying to assimilate us, then the federal government came through, tried to do the same thing, tried to send us to boarding school so that we can become, for lack of a better word, become white people, but that wasn't our destiny. So our elders, our traditionalists, resisted that to protect our culture. So these men that you see are some of the resistors, and because of their resistance, they were arrested, and they actually spent about 10 years at I almost said Aztec. Alcatraz. Alcatraz. They spent that many years in Alcatraz as prisoners just to protect our culture and our language and everything. So we went through a lot. So I'm going to end it there because I'm going to show you a video of something that is also very special to us, and it's also a good segue into the next performance that we'll do for you. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So.
We're farmers because we were given that. What the Creator told us was that He gave us our destination, a place, so we could do everything over there from heart, what we would need. That's when He gave us the planting stick and the seeds. In Hopi life, we are the children of the corn. We are the corn.
The clans began to understand that the place that we settled in was going to be a hard place to survive in. We look around our Hopi villages and it is pretty much semi-desert. We don't have much rainfall, but this was where the Hopi clans were told to go to. So this is our chosen place that we now live within. Together we carried out a way to survive here and to carry out this Hopi way of life. A way of life that we learned was to be hard. A way of life that was going to have corn and rain to be the most important things in our culture and our life.
I think it's part of our faith that comes from our heart, that if we pray hard enough, we hope to have lots of snow, and as you can see, some of the snow that's in my field here today, I'm real happy about that because I know that, it's going to help me when planting time comes.
If you're going to be a farmer, you have to know what it means to be a farmer. You don't simply put seeds in the ground, is what he said to me. You have to put seeds in the ground with prayer. You have to do this realizing what you're about to do You're about to start life, and you are continuing on the cycle of Hopi.
Never ever count your plants and number your plants like scientists do. You don't do that. They're not numbers, they're children. They're your children. So when you go to your field like that, then you're from a distance to your field, you're singing a song, and they see you, and they hear you say, "Our dad's coming." Where? And they tiptoe, and that's how they grow. Next stage, they're growing tall because they hear your voice and "Dad's coming." Where? And they tiptoe. That's how they grow. Okay, so you never look at your plant as numbers. They're your children.
And the woman and the girls have a responsibility to be the caretakers of everything that the men bring in. And both the woman and the girls, including the men and boys, consider their corn and everything that they bring in to be their children too. So they take care of them.
And I surely hope that you all can keep bringing in corn to your home, because corn can never be faded away from a Hopi home. It always have to be there. It always have to be our main food. If we don't have corn in a home, we'll starve, because the corn is the only thing that we survive on.
When we were young little girls, I remember our mother would not let us lay around and not do anything, especially when our dad or our brothers would go to the fields, our uncles. Don't just sit around and do anything while the men are at work for us planting corn, because we're gonna all benefit from it. It's work and it's fun. It's like your family here. My dad, my mom, my grandmother, they're all right here in this. We're called Hopis, and this is that. When you have this, you're a Hopi. This is you little kids, and us, everybody is corn. We all need food and water, just like the corn here needs rain.
Remember that for hundreds of years, the Hopi men have been doing this and growing this in this land where we live. It's not just happening today. It happened a long time, all during the history of the Hopi people. They have grown their own food, and they have lived and survived out here in this land just by planting the seeds that they came with and putting it into the ground. Hopi life is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. So a Hopi person should always remember that if it's worth doing and you're putting your hard work into it, do it with a good heart, enthusiasm, and willingness to do and accomplish as much as you can. It's like saying a small prayer each time, saying, I want you to grow, and I promise I will take care of you. And this is just the way Hopi lives with one another. We say our prayers daily, every day. We recognize and acknowledge the sun, because that's where all our energy comes from. With the sunlight, everything grows, even people.
So, okay. So that kind of leads us into today's time, and those young men that were planting the corn, the beans, we still do it that way because that's what we believe in. Because if we do get away from that, then our spirits, the spirits that we believe in, will not come back to support us. So we've been through a lot of hard times as Hopi, and as long as we pray, keep our prayers strong. And we do not just pray for Hopi, we pray for all of you. We pray for people around the world. And in all our songs, that's also incorporated, that we never leave anybody out. We're always praying for all of you. So when you see people in different regions, different areas, everywhere we go, we're always offering our prayer.